it's one of those things where, like you said, it's not like, I can't go take it to a car wash and make it, shiny and brand new again and feel good. It's one of those things where, and I didn't even notice it, I'm not saying I was hiding from it, but I just thought about it one day and talking to Cassidy, and I was just like, wow, I think I'm depressed, that feeling I've been feeling and that mood I've been in. And, I try hard to, smile through the pain, and you would never see it on my face, but, just being able to have an outlet like this to talk about it, even feels good in itself.
I'm Megan Armstrong. Welcome to Life 6 Feet Above. 6 Feet Above was created when I started to share my story of spending 16 years wanting to be 6 feet under to now living a life full and happy 6 feet above. The more that I started to talk about my journey, my struggles, and my past, the more I realized people were genuinely interested and not judgmental at all, which is what I'd feared for so long. In fact, other people wanted to talk about their story as well, and for some reason they trusted me to do so. So the 6 Feet Above podcast is my way of helping to share other people's stories, finding out what works for them to create a life of happiness. Before we start this episode, I want to let you know it has some explicit language and some very serious subject matter. It may be triggering or sensitive to certain people. Please listen with discretion. This is Brandon's story. So episode 15, I am joined by an older friend, not too old, but just a couple years now, Mr. Brandon Chubb, who I met, of course, through fitness, where I feel like I've met a lot of my guests, but in a very different capacity. We've never worked together. He was actually a client that came in one day, and of course, when we get men in a group fitness setting, we're like, who's this guy? So of course I looked you up. I'm like, oh, he plays in the NFL, and he's got a reputation in the community. And you walked in, and I have to say, like, I think there's a stigma about NFL players, and you walked in and you were just the most genuinely nice human being that I had met. And it was so refreshing to be like, because I've been around a lot of athletes my entire life. I went to Syracuse, football, basketball, the whole thing. And you're just another guy.
No, I appreciate that. You're correct with the stigma, and that's one thing I try to focus on. It's not like I go out my way to do it, but I'm just being a great person, nice person, always leaving a smile on every encounter you have with somebody, because you never know when it'll be the first or when it'll be the last. And like you said, you met me through fitness, and all your network is mostly through fitness. So you just never know who you come across and who those people come across, So always just trying to leave a good impression. Just be a great guy. There's no reason to, be anything else.
I think that's why I was like, okay, we're going to be friends. So here we are.
Yeah.
So you're a local boy, Brandon Chubb. Mm-hmm. You are from Marietta, Georgia.
Yep.
What high school did you go to?
Went to Hillgrove High School. Okay. It was built in 2006. And so that would have been my 8th grade year. And it's right next to McEachern in Powder Springs. And it was built just because McEachern had got to a point where it was overflown, and they just needed another place to have all these kids go, because McEachern was more of a college campus. It was an old college. So it could hold a large capacity of students, but it just got to a point where it was overwhelming. So then they built my school.
So how many kids were in your graduating class?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I would say it wasn't anything small. It was a 5A school. So we were the, in the top level of size wise of school. So whatever that average number is, I can't give you a number, but yeah, it was a good school.
So born and raised in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
What was life like growing up? What did your parents do? You've got a brother. Do you only have? It's just Bradley.
It's just us two.
It's
yep.
Bradley? Okay. Mm-hmm. Tell me what growing up in the South and especially Georgia was like, because I'm from upstate New York.
Right.
It's a whole other world.
So it was I enjoyed growing up in the South. My dad is from Rockmart, Georgia, which is closer to Alabama, the Georgia-Alabama border, like northwest of Atlanta. And my mom is from Cleveland, Ohio, actually, but she grew up in Southwest Atlanta. And so I had, two parents that were from the area. We grew up in Austell. When I was 3 years old, we moved to Marietta, and that's the house we moved to in Marietta is where I spent my whole, life, until I was, I think, 22 when my brother went to college and my parents moved. But it was one of those experiences where, I grew up with a dad who played football, who was into sports, who was, a super figure to, me and my brother. And then my mom was just a strong, independent, black woman who was in corporate world, at the top of the food chain in her industry. She did affordable housing, and so she had an edge to her as well, and a motivation that she would bestow upon me and my brother of working hard and breaking barriers and staying consistent. Because like I said, she's from Cleveland, Ohio. She grew up in Southwest Atlanta, so she didn't have this perfect childhood. She had two parents that got divorced. My dad's family is, more close knit because his parents stayed together their whole life, and he has 7 other brothers and sisters. My mom, 3 other brothers and sisters. So we had a family that was, hardworking, but also, I don't know, you could say, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for, but it was just big family. We all cared about each other. Like I said, my parents together had 11 siblings amongst the 2 of them. So it was all about a family atmosphere and taking care of each other. I had a little brother, like you said, 2.5 years apart. So, my dad growing up made sure that I took care of him. And even when we would fight and go at it, he would just make sure that stayed in the house, because when we're out in the real world, or whether that's in school, football, whether other people's houses and sleepovers, I'm the father at that point. I got to look out for him. So that was life growing up, and that kind of channeled into sports and got us to where we're at today. So
did he put you in football when you were young, or how
yes.
did that come about?
So that's a great question, because a lot of people, we grew up in a football family, and a lot of people think that from day one, my dad put me in a football helmet, but it was more of a thing where me and my brother looked up to him. Like I said, he was kind of like the Superman figure to us. And we had a room in our house. It was him and my mom's office, and it was painted Georgia Bulldog wallpaper. It had his jerseys.
Did he go? Oh, he went to Georgia?
He went to Georgia,
okay.
yeah. So it had his memorabilia, his team pictures, his NFL team pictures and stuff like that. We used to walk around in the house with his, actual game-worn jerseys. So it was one of those things you just kind of wanted to fulfill that legacy, or that, what he did. You wanted to be just like him. And so we started off playing all sports, basketball, baseball, soccer, football, the big 4. And by the time he got to, at least for me, I got to 8th grade in basketball, I was playing center. And so growing up, I was, one of the taller kids, and center at that point in 8th grade, people are starting to grow and grow into their bodies. And I just knew I wasn't a center by yet.
You were surpassed.
Right. So I knew that wasn't a career for me. And so I focused all my energy into football, especially going into high school. I just kind of wanted to be able to put all that energy and all that focus into one sport and excel at it. So that's kind of how that happened. And I would say football, because it is a contact sport, we started that around probably 6 or 8 years old.
Really?
Yeah. So we started young, and my brother was the same way. I think his 8th grade year, he stopped playing basketball. Obviously, he's taller than me.
Taller than you
so I think he played all the way to high school, actually, but he had a bigger passion for it and excelled at it, and then kind of took the same path as me, as dwindling down to football. And I think he ran track as well.
Were you always a linebacker?
No, at Hillgrove, I was a defensive end. Growing up, I was when I was 8 years old and 10 years old and playing middle school ball, I was a fullback, I was a tight end, and then get to Hillgrove, I'm a defensive end. So kind of finding that niche and my strength, and DN at the time was my strength. Like I told you at the beginning of this pod, we were a brand new school, so we didn't have a lot of talent to pull from. That's, ironic now if you look about all the kids we put in the NFL, but especially at the time, so we didn't have a lot of talent to pull from. And so I had to do what was in the best interest of the team. And at that time, we needed a defensive end because we had a lot of linebackers that could play and win this game. So I played defensive end and got to Wake Forest and spent the year redshirting to develop my skills. And the best fit for me then was linebacker. And that's how I developed into that.
So growing up, I mean, obviously you wanted to kind of fulfill, your dad's dreams as well and make him proud. But looking back, do you feel like there's a lot of pressure? Would you have done anything differently? Like, would you still have chosen football and chosen this path knowing what you know now? Yeah,
100%. There, like I said, we played every sport, so it wasn't really no pressure. I think the only pressure was when we did play a sport, whatever it may have been, we had pressure to excel at it, or at least to give it our all. Our dad taught us to never half-ass anything. So whether that's cutting grass or, raking leaves, don't half-ass it. And so even in sports, he could tell if we weren't, all in it on that sport or at the game or whatever it may have been. So we would get, scolded about that. But if we wanted to do it, he just made sure he lined it up so we could excel in it the best way possible. And so looking back on it, I'm glad I chose football. I'm glad the path that I chose, because where I'm at today is I can have a foundation with me and my brother, and that's 2 NFL players, have a larger platform to just maximize the impact we create into our communities.
Right.
And you know, it's a lot of nonprofits and a lot of people doing great things, but I can't say that we would have had the same impact if I was just a regular guy who just, you know, didn't play sports or wasn't on TV, you know.
Right.
And there's no shade to anybody, but I think that's allowed a lot of opportunities for us, not even from the foundation side, but from, you know, meeting people like you or, you know, whatever we have done or come across in our path so far.
Yeah. Well, I'm honestly just so grateful. You know, I had you in mind a long time ago, and I'm like, I don't know if he'll ever come on here and talk about this stuff. So just want to put that out there that I'm incredibly grateful, especially for men that will come on this show and talk about real issues, because I think it's much harder for a man to talk about emotions and real life experiences because you are raised differently than a female, right? Especially a guy in the NFL.
Right.
So we're going to dive into all of that, but I kind of want to segue into something that is on the front burner right now, and that's race.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about this the other day, and I like to say I like to save stuff for the actual interview. And like I told you when we were talking the other day, like I grew up in upstate New York. There was one black family in my whole entire city, you know, village. And I really wasn't around anyone else of color until I went to college. And so let's just talk about in Marietta. You know, it's not you're not in like College Park, right? So you're in a different part of Atlanta. It's a wealthier part of Atlanta.
Yep.
So let's just kind of jump into race in Atlanta growing up and where it's at now and kind of where we're going with
I'm
it.
glad you actually brought that up because I didn't mention it when I talked about Hillgrove earlier, but McEachern, this big school who was a ex-college campus, so you have all these kids going there. It's looked at as an elite school. Parents, you know, buy houses in that district so their kids can go to McEachern when they go to high school. And it got to a point, and this is where race comes in. This is an experience I had, is that they built Hillgrove, honestly, to take all the white people out of McEachern and put them in a different school.
Really?
And so I didn't say that because I didn't want to jump straight into it. But yeah, that's why Hillgrove was built. And so it was a lot of redistricting or rezoning different districts to get subdivisions. And I remember, you know, in middle school, my parents would talk about it every week on the news. They would just see a new district outline of neighborhoods and subdivisions because some subdivision wanted theirs to be district for Hillgrove now instead of McEachern and vice versa. So it was a lot of, race being at play in the Marietta area as well, just because you had Powder Springs, which is, I would say, predominantly black or has bad areas. And so these kids started going to McEachern, and then Hillgrove was built because these parents raised enough concerns and enough, uproar to get their kids out that school district. And so that's an experience I had with race growing up, but also going into my neighborhood. I told you we moved there when I was like three or 4 years old, and it was a nice neighborhood, a $400,000 house. This is in 2000 or probably 1997. So you can imagine but you don't count for inflation, what that house looks like. And one thing I noticed, and I didn't notice it then because we lived in a cul-de-sac, but all the neighbors and my parents, talked to me about white flight, when I grew older. But
did they really?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people moved out, and, me not understanding, I'm just thinking they're moving because they want a different house, or they're moving because, jobs, whatever it may be.
What did they say? Did they explain why white people were moving, or did they just say this is happening?
So they didn't explain it at the time. It's just something I knew because we were in a cul-de-sac. We're the one with the basketball goal in our driveway. So everybody's coming to our house. I know all the kids in the neighborhood. But, growing older, I would bring up a situation and they'd be like, oh, well, that's what they did when in our old neighborhood. And then they would explain and then go into it. And this is, me at 22, 21 years old, college educated at this point. So I'm understanding it now. And, looking back on it, you would have neighbors who, didn't like their kids talking or coming over in our driveway. And at the time when you're 10 years old, 15 years old, you don't notice it. You just think they're in trouble or their parents are in a bad mood. But it's just one of those situations. And so that's kind of experiences I've had with race. I've never been in a predicament where, I'm, whatever you want to say.
Severe racism that we're hearing about now, right?
But I've obviously experienced it and from the color of my skin and it's always little minor things here and there, but nothing that's got in my way of being to where I'm at today. So thankfully for that.
Are those communities now in Marietta more blended, or are they still very much segregated?
Yeah, so I would say they're more blended. Hillgrove is probably 60-40, 60
Okay.
being white, 40 being black at this point. When I was in school, it was more 85-15 or,
Okay.
80-20 if you want to say. And going back to my old neighborhood, whenever I'm in the Marietta area, I'll just drive by my old house just to see what it looks like because I spent 18 years of my life there. And that neighborhood is more blended now. You can see what the kids playing outside, the neighbors in the cul-de-sac, whatever it may be. You can see more blending and more diversification, which is a good thing. And, going back to Hillgrove, you see it as well through the sports, through the faculty,
Right.
through whoever,
Right.
going to a game, you see it in the crowd. So
this might be a dumb question, but I feel like when a school breaks off like that, when it comes to sports, especially football and basketball, I would assume that your school was a powerhouse compared to.
yeah, so that's a great question as well because McEachern had a lot of talent and they still do to this day, especially in football. I think last year they won the basketball state championship, boys and girls, but all those kids that went to Hillgrove, like me, Evan Ingram, my brother, Kean Drake, all these NFL players that ended up at Hillgrove, if you had put those same guys and never broke Hillgrove or McEachern apart, I mean, that could have been 5 or 6 state championships in a row,
Right.
in a certain era. We could have been a dynasty. So growing at Hillgrove, when I was a freshman, the second year Hillgrove was open was the first senior class. So when Hillgrove was open, obviously they didn't accept any seniors because they wanted those seniors to have
go through.
because it would just been awkward and weird for them to not know anybody in their senior year. And so I was the first full class or second full class to graduate as a freshman through senior through Hillgrove. And so by that point, the program had built up. By the time it was my senior year, we had more talent. Guys were developing.
Right.
And guys from different areas were getting, houses in that area. So they were coming to our school. So,
Interesting.
but we always joke about it. Imagine what could have been if that school never broke off, just from basketball, football, swimming. I mean, baseball. McEachern is a powerhouse in sports and Hillgrove as well. So if you combine the two instead of competing versus each other, it could have been a whole different story.
So, and that's like one thing I've actually never thought about before is the competition between white people and black people, right? And they want to compete in the educational sense or hey, we just don't want to be a part of that black community. But when it comes to sports, I mean, let's just face it. White people like to watch sports, and predominantly the NFL, not baseball. Let's say the NFL basketball. It's predominantly black, right? So you're gonna bet on these guys. You're gonna who's gonna win the Super Bowl? All the things going on in Vegas, like they're betting on black guys playing sports, but yet they don't want their kids being a part of it growing up.
Right.
Like how fucked up is that?
It's crazy, and you think about it now. Even the NBA coming back, a lot of players are objecting it because they think. It's putting their health at the the hands of white consumers, just to make a quick buck and to entertain you through the pandemic. And so it's interesting because like you said, the best players you have, not the best players, but the majority of players you have are black athletes, black players. But then when it comes to off the field things, you want nothing to do with them or you treat them. But when they're in those lines, they're gods and they're whatever you want to call them. But then it's a totally different thing off the field when the helmet comes off or that jersey comes off.
Yeah. How do you feel about the NFL coming back?
Like, do I think it will come back or do I want it to come?
Let's say, do you think it will come back?
I think it'll be delayed. Me and you made a bet this weekend. Hopefully it comes back because a lot of livelihoods are on the line for that. Not even for the players, but arena workers and stadium workers and people who do the ancillary things on game days and throughout the week that make the NFL run. So, but I think it will be delayed. Basketball has yet to come back, and basketball will come back first. And I think that'll be a good litmus test of how sports can thrive in this climate and during this pandemic. So, football is a little trickier because every play you're getting hit in the head or, you're getting yanked or whatever it may be. So everything is projected out. So, I mean, it would be hard for that not to spread unless, it's daily testing and still that, players are going home to their family and no telling what their family and who they're coming across. So it'll be a tricky thing. But hopefully it does come back but definitely for a fact, it'll be delayed at least in my opinion.
And do you want it to come back?
I do want it to come back. I think it's a great question because I mean, I think there's work to be done. The NFL has made great strides in this protesting thing and in this climate with race and what's going on with the police killings and stuff like that with George Floyd, they've come out and have acknowledged that these things are happening, which they wouldn't have done a year ago or 2 years ago. So just being able to be back on the field to keep that momentum going, to make this change really happen, and to highlight it. Like I said, as an NFL player, you have a platform, so now your voice gets louder, your actions are magnified. So I think it could be a great stage for real change.
Do you ever feel like the things that are going on, like for instance, we were talking about this the other night, NASCAR is taking down the Confederate flag now. Like now it's a good time. Do you ever feel like we're doing things in society just because we're trying to keep up and make a statement, and we're not really doing it for the right reasons, versus white people? I see a lot more of my white friends taking pictures with black people. And it's like, you were either friends with them before all this or not. Like you and I go back, 2-3 years. And like now that it's all going on now, it doesn't make a difference for me. For me. But do you see that from the black side looking in? Or how do you feel about that?
So I think we talked about this, like you said, a little bit this weekend. But let's go to your example first of posting your black friend or, showing that those performative type of gestures are, you see kind of through them. But at the same time, you got to look at it as a black person. You just got to look at it as long as it's making awareness. So even if they're doing it for the wrong reasons, it's helpful because it brings awareness. And with the Confederate flag, that should have been done a long time ago. But the fact that they're doing it is at least addressing the problem. With the Bubba Wallace thing, they're pushing his car to the start line and showing their support. That's helpful. Even if they don't mean it, even if the 30 other NASCAR drivers are just doing it because their boss above them said they have to do it. It's still people, NASCAR fans at home watching this who are thinking you're a god are going to listen to you and at least make a change in their daily lives. And like I told you, it helps. The most you can do, or if you don't think you could do anything, the most you could do is in your circle of white friends, if you hear a racial slur, you hear something that doesn't really paint black people in a great light, you can just stop it or just correct it.
Right.
And you don't have to post a picture on Instagram about what you've done in the past and what your organization is going to do, because at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. So I think both of them, as we look at it, as from a black person, it helps because at least even if you faking it, at least draws awareness, but also making that action to make that change, instilled in the roots of society will help too.
I'm so glad you cleared that up because I've been struggling with that for a few weeks, and that I'm like, well, I don't want to do something just because people are going to look at me and be like, oh, she's only doing that because this whole black white thing is going on. But I was raised to love everyone, no matter who they are, where they're from, and I've always kind of lived that way. And people are terrible no matter what race, color, religion, right? There's good people and there are bad people. So I'm so glad you cleared that up, because if the incentive is wrong or it's not, necessarily being done for the right reason, if it gets the job done, then you guys are cool with that.
Yeah, it's a victory. It's
a
small step.
I'll take
small
it.
step in a long race. So.
I'll take it. Yeah. So were you in Atlanta when the riots happened a few weeks ago?
Yes. I live in Vining, so right outside the perimeter. And we did a protest. Brianne, our friend Brianne, she held her own protest in Sandy Springs that we were a part of, and that was good to get our voices heard. I think the reception was real great out there, and that's one of those areas, suburbs, like even Marietta. You can go in the suburbs and kind of escape this. You don't really have to face this. You don't have to drive through Marietta Street downtown and get to home or go to work. So you don't really have to, really be in it. And so being able to at least raise awareness in a peaceful way in Sandy Springs or in Marietta or wherever it may be is a exhilarating moment as well, just to see the reception, because a lot of these people never experience, it's a lot of white people, they have a lot of privilege and never experience something, but at least they acknowledge and they're aware of it, and that's a great thing as well. Because the fact of the matter is, and I told people this, I was on Tyler Cameron, my friend, I was on his Instagram live, and I talked to him about this a little bit. The fact that it's never happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? So at least you acknowledge it, and then secondly, ask yourself, am I a part of the problem that I just acknowledged, or am I not?
Right.
And if you're not, then that's a good thing, but help other people who might be part of the problem that are in your circle that you can reach, that listen to you. And that's how progress is made.
How else can we help?
Mm-hmm.
Because you do have a lot of white friends.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, selfishly, like, what else can we do?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the discussion right now is like, okay, we're giving all these examples of racism. Like, we know that's happening.
Yep.
Like, it's clear, it's out there, it's always happened. It's just now it's being recorded. And that's not going to solve the problem. So how can we help you? What can we do? Whether it's for the right reason or the wrong reason, besides, like you said, the example of just kind of standing up for people and be like, you don't need to use that word or whatever.
You could definitely help, one, by starting with the root. So, racism isn't taught. Like you said, you grew up in Syracuse, New York, but it was a lot of white people around you. Yeah. But, you accepted me as a black man, and we became friends instantaneously. And same with me. I grew up in Marietta. I have black friends. I have a lot of white friends, and I still have a lot of white friends. Going to Wake Forest had even more white friends around.
I was about to go there next. I'm like, Wake Forest. Wow, that's it's pretty predominantly white school.
So it's one of those things that racism was never taught to me. I was just aware of what being the color of my skin, what could be presented to me in a negative way, but it was never treat this other race the wrong way, or we're superior or nothing like that.
Right.
And so that goes to, if you're a parent and you have young children, just instilling them that, there is no right and wrong when it comes to skin color. Yeah. And even though they might not see color, at the same time, they might be in a situation that they might start being around people who do see color, and that could rub off on them. So at least now they acknowledge that, or they're aware of that. So when it does come, this is happening, so that they can, hold themselves accountable when it's time to make those decisions, or those friends, or that whatever it may be. And then people who, like I told you, if you're in a predominantly white friend circle and something isn't right, or something is said that you don't, doesn't sit well in your heart, they wouldn't be saying. If one of your black friends are around that, or that you wouldn't repeat them when you're black friends, just acknowledge it. You don't have to say, oh, like, I'm never friends with you again, but at least, put them in a situation where social proof and embarrassment will be caused if, something isn't correct.
Just call them out.
Just call them out. Yeah.
It's interesting. I had on Father's Day this past Sunday, I had a long conversation with my dad, and he's 66. Again, he grew up in upstate New York too, and played hockey, which is also predominantly white. He's a lawyer. So we kind of got into talking about the politics of everything happening. And I guess for me, I just feel like it's going to be really hard to change. It's going to be really hard to change. I think the opportunity, and you touched on this, the opportunity is with our age group, the 20s and 30s, the people that are about to have children. It's the next generation. Like these 50 and 60-year-old white men that have been raised to think that they are above black men. They're not going to change at this point in life. We are who we are, right? And this kind of goes along with the mental health and wellness too. Like, you've been raised your entire life, 50, 60, 70 years, all these guys in Congress, in the House, like predominantly 67-year-old white men. They were raised with privilege. We are not going to change that. That is not, they're not going to change who they are. They might start doing things, better for the wrong reason, like we talked about. But I think the opportunity is with the next generation, living by example, treating everyone equally, and teaching our younger 20s and teenagers that, like, this is unacceptable, and that we are all in this world together. Right.
And I see it as, even with, stuff we do with the Chubb Foundation, we target kids in the community just because they're more moldable. It's just like pouring concrete, the quicker you do something with the concrete, the easier it is to shape. And the longer you wait, the harder it gets to shape until it's, so like you said, those guys who are 60, 70 years old, who've been doing this for 70 years or had this thought process, it's going to be really, really hard to change their mindset. Hopefully, even if they don't change their mindset, they accept, or at least acknowledge, like you can acknowledge that racism exists and that right versus wrong when it comes to this race thing, and still not change. But at least if you acknowledge it, you're more aware of it, and you might, think twice about something,
and
or
maybe not contribute.
Exactly. Contribute. You could still agree with whatever you've been doing for the past 70 years. Hopefully you don't, but you can still agree with, but at least you're aware of it. You're more mindful, and you might not pour more fuel in the fire now.
Right. And I guess, to basically contradict what I just said, it's never too late to change, whether that's to change your physical being or your mental health or the way you view other people. I mean, I guess there's still an opportunity. I guess
it's going to be way harder, but
It's going to be way harder. I think I'm looking at like the political level, right? The politics of it all. Great segue to Wake Forest, like you mentioned. So you graduated and... Did you get, stupid question, did you get a full ride to Wake Forest or what?
Yeah, full scholarship.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, my recruiting journey was a difficult time in my life because we were this new school, like I've told you, and we weren't on, the maps of recruiters and college coaches at the time. We were kind of overlooked. And I was one of the pioneers of the guys to play football for that school. So I kind of had to set the foundation. And, we had a guy above me, St. John Days, who was the first, he was in the class of the first freshman to senior to graduate. So he went off to Georgia Tech because he was an outstanding player. He should have had way more offers. But he went to Georgia Tech, had a great career, and, everything happens for a reason. And so I come along right behind him, and I'm getting recruited to Furman, Georgia Southern, Chattanooga, going into my senior year. So it was really late. I went to my senior year with 0 offers. So now I'm filling out applications, just trying to get in as a student at this point, and working on my SAT and ACT scores. And, these AA schools like Georgia Southern, Furman, come along, and then App State ends up offering me right at the end of my high school senior year. So I commit to App State, and a week, if signing day is February 4th, which is a Wednesday, the Thursday before signing day, Wake Forest comes to my school and says, hey, we heard about Brandon. We want to take a look at him, have him come to the campus. Somebody just decommitted, so we have a scholarship available. We can't promise anything, blah, blah, blah. So I met with them, and, I called my dad, and the first thing he said is, all right, cool. Like, let me know what time. And so we went up to Wake Forest that Friday, Saturday. I committed, and then signed to Wake Forest officially that Wednesday. So it just happened at the drop of a hat. But it was an awesome opportunity because Wake Forest did a lot for me from a career standpoint, but also from a man standpoint.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. It's Wake Forest. We call it the Wake Forest bubble, because Winston-Salem, is one of the most impoverished cities per capita in the nation.
Really?
So it's a big food desert. It's a lot of things, but Wake Forest is like a subdivision. It's only 4,000 kids. It's literally like a subdivision. It's 3 ways to get in. They're all gated entries. And inside Wake Forest, you got people from Syracuse, you got people from Connecticut, you got people from Delaware. So you have these households that can, pay $70,000 a year for tuition, and their parents or, lawyers or CEOs and stuff like that. And so they're kind of, oblivious to the world around them. They've been in kind of this bubble, and now they're back in this bubble. And so I had a taste of that, and I got to experience that. And I think that helps us from a growth standpoint too, because it opens your mind to how everybody else acts, So now I can sit in a room with you, or sit in a room with her, or sit in a room with somebody else, and not be awkward interactions, or I know how to deal with the situation from a leadership standpoint or a communication standpoint. And you learn a lot. You meet a lot of people, like you said, your network with fitness, same way with Wake. My network through Wake Forest, because the American Express, his granddaughter's a freshman in the same class as me, or something like that. You get to experience a lot of different cultures, backgrounds, and beliefs and views, right or wrong, but you get to learn from them.
Right.
I remember since we're talking about race, my freshman year, a KA, I won't say his name, but we were coming back from a frat party, and we were in the same dorm, and he was he called me an N-word, long story short, and we got into it, and I handled the situation. But that was my big wake-up call, that I'd never been called the N-word in my life, and I grew up in Marietta, so around a lot of white people, and it was just one of those wake-up calls that the world is different, and not everybody views me the same.
How did you handle the situation? I'm not gonna let you bypass that.
I knocked the dude out.
Yeah. So that anger, that aggression came out.
Yeah. So he it was one of those things where, he was a lot even people in his own fraternity couldn't really stand him, and so he just came off mouthing his mouth, and I kind of know we're all intoxicated. And then he doubled down on the statement, and I asked, or before that, I tell him, don't say it again. Just it's not. I have all my white friends are with me too. So it's not like it's something that they're agreeing, or I'm in a bad environment. It's like everybody's just like, yo, you're being a dick. He doubles down on it, knock him out, and I honestly became a legend for 3 months on the campus, because everybody was so happy, because that dude, they just knew his personality and knew how he was, and obviously he had probably been saying it amongst them, and they were just uncomfortable with it as well. But it was one of those situations where it was a wake-up call that just because people didn't see me for the color of my skin in Marietta, or people said to me on the football team who are white, doesn't mean everybody's like that. And it's, got to be aware of that.
What is playing college football like due to one's psyche?
It could be a false sense of reality depending on what school you go to. Wake Forest is a high academic school, so even Syracuse as well. You will understand this, that I mean, they just don't let anybody in, even if you're great at football. So you have to keep a academic rigor and academic standard to an extent, but you also have to perform on Saturdays or whatever day your sport plays and do it at a high level. So, and while being independent, away from family, 1,000 miles or 100 miles from home, wherever you may have come from. So it's a lot of adjustments and a lot of things you have to, you know, as a grown man or grown woman, adjust to and grow up to at a quick pace. And so whether that's being homesick and still having a lot of pressure on you being the top recruit and they expect you to do certain things during games at a young age, or being, you know, somebody who was under recruited like me and now having a chip on my shoulder that I got to prove that I belong here and prove that I'm just not a quota. I didn't meet a quota or a scholarship to, you know, just fill a quota or make a recruit look good. So,
it's got to be hard to be like, wait, there is an opportunity here, but also like, screw you for not looking at me beforehand, or you know, screw the high school that split off that I didn't have a good opportunity.
It's funny because the coach who came to recruit me, that on that Thursday came to Hillgrove High School. I ended up having really, you know, mixed feelings towards him, even while he was a coach for me at Wake Forest. Just because, like, even when I got to campus, I was treated as this like guy who, you know, at least to him, I was treated as this guy who can't play at this level, was just kind of given the scholarship because somebody dropped out. So it was like a hand-me-down. And he was there my first 2 years, ended up going to a different school. But, you know, I excelled and exceeded expectations. So it felt good to, you know, do that. But at the time when I'm 18, 19, it was hard, you know, especially, you know, when my friends are at Georgia Tech and Alabama and Ole Miss and they're playing and catching touchdowns as, you know, freshmen. And I'm a redshirt sophomore and waiting for my time to come, waiting for the coaches to believe in me, even though I'm doing all this stuff at practice and kind of just being pushed aside because the guy they recruited was higher rated than me. And now I had to, you know, overcome that, you know, politics are involved as well. So
does that create a sense of insecurity?
So I would say a chip on your shoulder, at least for me.
A blow of the ego?
Yeah, so it could be a chip on your shoulder. Could be that it could be two opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people have chips on their shoulder, overcompensate, and so that insecurity is triggered right away, and so they overcompensate for that insecurity. Especially if they have an ego involved, then it's even worse.
For you, as a motivator.
So it's a motivator. Yeah. So some guys who, and you could know those, you could sniff those guys out who have chips on their shoulders that are, it just kind of repels you and it jumps off the screen. And you would never know because I'm always smiling, I'm always positive. So my chip on my shoulder isn't like, fuck the world because Wake Forest didn't want to, you know, or Georgia didn't want to give me a scholarship. It's just kind of like, all right, you didn't believe in me. I'll show you better than I can tell you. You know what I'm saying? So,
like what I always say about guys. I'm like, confidence over cockiness.
And
it's, when a guy is cocky, it's because they're so insecure.
Yeah.
But when a guy is confident, it's because they're motivated.
Yeah.
And they know what they want and they know that they deserve it. Right. And they're going to have to work hard for it.
And I feel like confidence you can feel from a person when they enter the room. Cockiness you can like sniff out.
100%.
So, you know, it's a different sense, you know. So you confident, you know you're about your business, but a cocky guy is going to let you know instead of showing, you know, it's just. And no, I mean, cocky guy or girl, it's nobody likes that. You know, at least me, I hate that.
Same. Yeah. And that's probably why we get along. So you're approaching the end of college and we're thinking NFL, right? How does, I don't even know how the process works. I mean, you were obviously good enough to get drafted and you went to, went to the Panthers?
Rams.
As
a rookie,
okay.
Yep. So the process is one of those where when you're eligible after 3 years. So you can go after 3 years or you can wait till you graduate and then you can go into the NFL. And obviously I waited till I graduated. So I graduated that December.
And what was your degree in? Just
economics.
Okay.
And so the draft is April. So January through April, I'm training. So I trained in Duluth at Chip Smith. And you just train for combine, you train for private workouts, and that's just kind of like an interview. Those are the interviews, like you're showcasing your athleticism, your skills.
And the school and the teams come to you.
So pro days, they come to your college and you showcase their combines. Okay. Everybody goes to Indianapolis at the Colt Stadium, and that's what you see on TV.
That's what we see on TV. Okay.
And they're there as well. So you have two opportunities, and then from there, that's when they make their evaluations, and then draft night is when they select you. Whether that's first round, seventh round, or undrafted, and you go to your respective team that following weekend after the draft, and then it just goes from there. So then you're a rookie, you're on the team, going through mini camp, trying to make the team, and then cuts are made the first weekend in September, so a week before the first game, and then the season starts. So it jumps right like that, and
You just have to be ready to go wherever.
You just have to be ready to go wherever. So like I was in Duluth training, and then LA 2 weeks later after the draft, and went there. Was in Oxnard where we had our mini camp at.
I know Oxnard.
Yeah, so we were just there for 3 months, and then that led to training camp, which we did at UC Irvine, and then we went back to Thousand Oaks where our practice facility was, and then season
started. So what
started.
round were you drafted?
So I was undrafted actually.
You were? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So I had a draft grade from the 5th through 7th round, and draft day the Rams only selected 5 players, and 4 of them were offensive players. So they traded a lot of they had more picks. They traded a lot. That's the year they took Jared Goff, number 1 overall. And so they just had slim pickings, So all those guys, they were trying to rebuild their offense. And so my agent was on the phone with them trying to get me drafted. And they used that last spot on a wide receiver. So then I came in undrafted with 22 other guys as rookies, and just went from there.
So does that chip on your shoulder come back at this point?
Yeah. And it's just kind of like my MO at this point. It's like, all right, well, this happened, in 2011. Now it's happening, as a rookie in the NFL. And so it was something that, God gives his biggest battles for a stronger soldier. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things where I handled it well. I still had a chip, and motivated me even more. And it just started all over. So it was obviously disappointing and devastating to me. I watched the whole draft. So 3 days of 3-hour programming, just sitting on the couch, just waiting for my phone to ring. And so when that opportunity came, I just tried everything I could to seize it, in LA through all that.
And granted, I've never, played at a professional level, but I would have to imagine I started competing when I was 5, and I was very, very good growing up. And when I stopped swimming, it was like I lost my identity. Mm-hmm. And I would have to imagine it almost feels like that. Like you prepare your whole life for football, and then you get to the draft, and it's just got to be this like sinking feeling at the end of day 3.
And so having that feeling was a great wake up call. And then fast forward 2 years later, my second year in the NFL, I tear my ACL. So those are 2 instances where the end of the tunnel, you can see the light, and you don't know how fast you're going to reach it. So then you have to mentally prepare for that. And so after I tore my ACL, I was realizing that, this is a 8-month injury. I might not ever come back from it and be the same. So I got to prepare for life after football. And then that's when I started doing things with business and networking to at least position myself and use, leverage my Wake Forest degree, leverage, people I came across while I was at Wake Forest to position me so that if football ever stopped, because it is a contact sport, it's 100% injury rate. So you never know when that day is coming, that I would be ready for it and not be forced into it.
Yeah.
I always wanted to, and I hope I still can do this, retire on my terms. That's, no better feeling than that, to be able to drop the mic when you want to and not when somebody slaps it out your hand,
Right. Which brings us to this year, right? So where does it stand with you in the NFL right now?
Yeah, so I'm a free agent. I was
So from the Rams to the
Lions to the Panthers.
Yep. Okay.
And so the past 2 years I've been with the Panthers. This July 2019, actually, I had a surgery right before camp, knee surgery, just a small knee scope, and kind of rushed that back because I wanted to be ready for camp and perform my best. And that kind of, made my injury a little worse. So then I went on IR for the whole year, injured reserve, for people who may not be acclimated with that term. And IR just means you're on the team, but you're not playing. You can't play for the whole year. Right. You're on an injury list, basically. And after that, came to this free agency. So my contract was up.
Was up this year.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the season. Yep. Okay. So now I'm a free agent, and then I had to get another knee surgery for the same problem because it never got better. And so I'm still battling that right now, but trying to sign a contract right before training camp starts, which would at this point be July 24th, but I think obviously it'll be pushed back. So I have a little bit more time, but just trying to get this knee as healthy as possible so I can perform.
So where are you mentally right now?
That's a great question. I was, I was this big, tough guy, growing up all male family with just one mom. Or obviously one mom, but just one female. So you have this macho to you, right? Not like super bro-y, but just like, I don't cry, I'm tough. Right. I'm the man, stereotypes, whatever. And so I never realized this, but I've been depressed for, a year and a half just because I could never get over this hurdle. And it's not something that I do everything, how hard I work. I just, or pay attention to every detail with this rehab. And it's just, I can't get over the hurdle of getting my knee completely healthy. And I've had 4 surgeries now on it, since July. So July, then October, and then February 2020. And then the last one was just May 19th, all by different doctors, except the last 2 were by the same doctor. But, just getting healthy, and it's frustrating because you feel good at one point after the surgery, and then it just hit a wall,
Right.
and then you just can't get over that wall. And then you're like, all right, well, the problem's not fixed. So I got, and so, me with Scope House, I was, doing Scope House twice a week. I was one of the biggest, Scope ambassadors just because I loved it so much.
Yeah.
And I would tell all my friends about it. We even had an event, or our Chubb Foundation
Which
event.
is where, so just so y'all know, Sculpt House was my former job, which I started and created the workout. And that's where I met Chubb. He walks in and he saw the treadmills, which is, it's a human powered treadmill.
Yep.
And you and Evan wanted to run, and I think you crushed him.
Crushed him.
So we met there.
And so, it's depressing because I can't use my body the way, even as a normal person. Take football aside, I'm just a health conscious fit, and I love working out. I have a garage gym now, so I love working out, but it's finding that balance of being competitive and having that chip on your shoulder, but not overdoing it because you're going to hurt yourself even more. And then it's just kind of like, when can I work out, or when can I lift, or when can I, be healthy, just sitting on the couch feeling normal and not, being that guy who is feeling pain going down the stairs or, just doing normal activities. It's depressed. It's 26,
Yeah.
So
and I give you so many props for being able to say, like, I have been depressed for a year now.
Yeah.
Most guys won't say that ever. You'll never hear them say it because there is such this stigma, this toxic masculinity, like, don't be a pussy, man up, don't cry, whatever. And it pisses me off so much because, the highest suicide rate in the country are men in their 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So they go through 50 years of suppressing this, going through injuries or whatever it is, not even sports.
Yeah.
And they finally just are like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And they tap out.
Right.
And it makes me so sad because if they talked about it more, especially a guy of your size, a guy of your confidence level, you do walk in the room and you own the room. I feel like, I get that. I understand that because people think the same about me. But if people only knew what was going on behind closed doors.
And I'm not a guy who, and from following me on Instagram, just being around me, I'm not going to, I don't like attention, so I'm not going to, I'm
not going to blast out what's going on.
Right. I'm not going to blast out, anything. And I'm also going to not just openly tell people, or I'm not going to, I try to, suppress my feelings and just kind of deal with it internally and motivate myself. I'm a great self-motivator, so I don't really need all this, external, motivation or whatever it may be, because I have inspiration, because I've had that chip on my shoulder. So then I take that into dealing with issues like this where, well, I can get over it because I got over ACL injury. I got over, being undrafted. I got over being under recruited and still excelled. So you kind of had that competitive future with mental health, and that's not good, So.
And I think this is huge. This is one of my biggest points, because depression, mental health, it's not tangible.
Mm-hmm.
You take your knee, let's fix the knee. Let's take, your career in the NFL and let's get you on another team. Like, we can fix it. Like, depression is arbitrary. Yeah. It's just out there, and the way we feel is how it's determined.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, like you said, it's not like I can't go take it to a car wash and make it, shiny and brand new again and feel good. It's one of those things where, and I didn't even notice it, I'm not saying I was hiding from it, but I just thought about it one day and talking to Cassidy, and I was just like, wow, I think I'm depressed, that feeling I've been feeling and that mood I've been in. And, I try hard to, smile through the pain, and you would never see it on my face, but, just being able to have an outlet like this to talk about it, even feels good in itself.
So Cassidy's your wife. Mm-hmm. And when you finally said, like, I think I'm depressed, like, what was her reaction? I mean,
she wanted me to, see a therapist. And
had she seen it? Did she kind of agree with you?
It made sense once I said it.
Okay.
Like, certain things, like, I would be grouchy for little things, or,
irritable,
or just not being as cheery, or not having as much, social battery at some points, just because, it would die after a certain point of I thinking about a moment, and then just, put me in a funky mood. And so, and she recommended therapy, but this is the time that COVID was happening, when I really realized it, like, early February. So I couldn't really do much about it except through like telemedicine, but
Right.
I wanted to, if I did it, to have somebody like how I'm sitting across from you right now to, get the full experience of it. But also just, me reading a lot, takes my mind off it. I have a book club, so now it's more social aspects in my life, even during this pandemic. So I'm able to at least have an outlet to, not talk about it, but, talk to people, and you just have social life.
Is important, but also like, you want to be aware of that, because if you just keep distracting, it's still there.
Exactly.
Right. You go to bed at night and you're in your own head anyways.
Yeah. Right.
And that's one thing that like, I still deal with sometimes when I get in my funks is I'll get distracted, but I also very much have to like focus on what's worked for me in the past.
Exactly.
So what are the things you're doing right now to kind of help situation?
I have a great pastor. So he does his sermons online, or they record the Sunday service every Sunday online as well. So I just watch sermons whenever I get in a funk. And, the Bible speaks to me and the scripture speaks to me. So I'm able to have some at least assurance and some faith through that. Mm-hmm. And then as well as just, telling myself it'll be all right. And, looking at little things in my life that other people don't have, whether it's opportunities or just, things around me that God's blessed me with and over my life that, cheer me up, that it could be worse. Yeah. Grateful for it. It could be worse, Well,
I think that's it. So I talked to a guest on my last episode and she talked about, I forgot the terminology, but it's basically doing the reverse. So whatever you're feeling, you do the reverse of. So if you're feeling really down and like, poor me, right? Mm-hmm. What am I actually grateful for? What's good in my life?
Right.
And focus on, and it like tricks your brain to kind of flip flop of getting out of that, funk at that moment.
So that's why I always try to, throughout my day, just always, think of positive things as far as like, something that's coming up in 3 days. I could get, work myself up to get a little excited for it, or, thinking about, what I'll do in 2 weeks or what, whatever it may be. Yeah. Just trying to see the positive things,
Yeah. So did you've obviously talked to a therapist. Did you ever talk about medication?
So I haven't talked to a therapist.
Oh, I thought you had.
No.
Okay.
So I was saying the only way I would be able to right now is through telemedicine, and I wanted to be able.
Don't want to do that.
Yeah, I want to. And I mean, if it came to a bad situation, I would obviously go and seek emergency help through telemedicine or whatever it may be. But I want to, just get immersed in the experience, just like when you play chess. I played a lot of chess. I hate playing online because it's just an experience,
totally
Yeah. So obviously mental health isn't chess, but just kind of that experience of being in the room and feeling the energy, feeling the vibes.
And I think something like this is going to be helpful for you anyways, because it's almost like that release when you finally say it out loud and you put your story out there and you're like, well, this is me, like judge away. And that's why I finally started the podcast. Cause I'm like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like I've thought the worst things about myself. Like you cannot possibly think anything that I haven't already thought. Right. So when you get to that point, it's like freeing. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, here I am, take it or leave it.
And even with your podcast, you saying something and letting it all out, you might not know who's listening. You might go through the same thing. And that even having that, being able to acknowledge that I might be helping somebody else through this as well is fulfilling and helps with that.
Especially in the sports world. Right. I mean, the studies that they do, especially after guys are out of the league and they're looking at their brains, I mean, it does affect them, physically and mentally, but like, it's concerning. It's concerning what they have to go through and kind of keeping up at that level. Right. And then what happens when that level's taken away from them?
You take a guy like Junior Seau, who was one of the best linebackers ever, and you would think he's a great looking guy, got all the girls, had all this money, lives in San Diego, which isn't cheap, and it's a nice living if you live in San Diego. And he blows his head off, and 10 years after he left the league, and it's not because he didn't have money or because he didn't enjoy the material things of life. He had everything he could imagine, but it was just mental health at that point, and being out the league and not having that, like you said, you lose kind of an identity, and maybe he struggled with that. Maybe CTE definitely played a part in it from the studies they did on his brain, but just all that mounted up pressure or tension or whatever it may be,
and not knowing how to deal with it.
Not knowing how to deal with it.
Never being coached emotionally, only being coached physically.
And like I said, he's looked at as one of the best linebackers ever. So he probably had, fear of going to ask for help and being vulnerable, because people are looking at you like, why is Junior Seau in here?
You have everything you could possibly want.
You've been knocking dudes' heads off, or, you're this tough guy. I see you as this tough guy, this superhero. Like, so maybe he thought that's how he would be perceived as well if he, spoke out about it.
So I think therein lies the next opportunity with the next generation, especially of young male athletes, teaching them that, sports is important, but how do they deal with things emotionally? And it's not just about your physical being, and it's not just about the cars that you can buy and the jewelry you can buy when you sign that deal.
Right.
There's so much more to life.
Right.
And you're doing that with the Chubb Foundation. Right. So tell us a little bit about the foundation, how it started, and where you're at now.
So it started because when I mentioned Winston-Salem earlier about being a food desert and the Wake Forest bubble. So you step outside of Wake Forest's campus, it's a whole different scenario. The neighborhoods are different. Right. The streets look different. The buildings look different. And so going into my junior year, I wanted to, do something off the field and put my time to use. Obviously we play on Saturdays, so the weekends are kind of off limits, but that Sunday is, really our only rest day. And so it's this organization that was called Help Our People Eat that still goes on to this day, but they would take sack lunches and drive around these impoverished communities when kids don't have those, lunch meals that they're getting through Monday through Friday. So they're not really getting proper nutrition. And we would pass them out and at the community centers or at the neighborhood center or whatever it may be. And so that feeling and that fulfillment from giving back really stuck with me. So when I got to the NFL, going into my second year when I tore my ACL, I had all this free time. I always knew I wanted to give back, but I didn't really know how I could use my platform effectively to do that. And so it was a perfect opportunity. October 21st, my birthday, Georgia Tech played at Wake Forest played at Georgia Tech. So I got to watch a Wake game, 20 minutes down the road. And so I thought it would be cool to have kids come to this game with me and, take them out and show them a good time, but also, use my, network at Wake Forest to get me on the field, get me in the locker room so these kids can dream bigger. That's the whole thing about our camp. We want kids to dream bigger. That's why we do it at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Yeah. Even if you don't become a football player, just knowing that this is in your backyard or you've never been here, that gives you no motivation to succeed, So
well, you only see it on TV.
Exactly.
And it's like that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
That's fake.
It's fictional,
like,
right?
When they're actually there in person, they're like, oh shit, this is real. Like this could happen.
Exactly. So that event at Georgia Tech jump started our foundation. I took like 10 kids, but to enable to do it and not have any liability because you're taking these kids from their parents to downtown Atlanta in a van with some random driver. I had to get the foundation started just so I could get some protection from a liability standpoint. And so Evan Rosenberg, my agent and a great friend of yours as well, he just having a legal background helped, jumpstart that and get that rolling. And so from there, Bradley came into the league a year later. And so we had two platforms and we just wanted to maximize it through, our community and through our to our youth. Cause like I told you with the concrete, you want to get it while it's still wet as possible. Cause you can mold it and kind of shape it in any form you want, rather than when they're, 25 or 18, cause it's just a little more, dry and it's harder to, make that change or that impact last. And so that's what we've been doing with our foundation. We do initiatives like entrepreneurship programs, chess programs. We do our annual camp. We do holiday events where we give back to families in the community for Thanksgiving dinners or Christmas dinners, taking that pressure off parents to provide for their kids when they can prioritize other things like light bills or, whatever. A lot
of them only, may only have one parent at home, right? So for them to know that there are other people in this community that care about them and that want them to succeed and that have done it themselves, I think, that's huge.
And like you said, they see it on TV. So for a black kid, when I watch TV growing up, if I see a lawyer, I see a doctor, they don't look like me. They're white. And obviously there's black lawyers, there's black doctors. So I want kids to feel that, they are represented as well, that people that look like them can do great things, just like people that are shown on their television or shown in their school. So,
and you're not only worthwhile if you play a sport.
Exactly. Right? So, a lot of, people don't get the fact that, having somebody who cares about you goes a long way for somebody who's young, like you just spoke of. If I know I have somebody who's investing time, energy, resources when they don't have to
Yep.
on me, it kind of, makes me want to not let them down.
Right.
Even if I don't want to be better for myself, I want to be better for them. And so these kids, I think, have that kind of pressure when we're around them too, is, Brandon and Bradley don't have to be here. They can, be sitting in their houses or in Denver or going on planes, but they're coming into my neighborhood and they're coming to my school on a Thursday. They don't have to do this.
Right.
And so I don't want to let them down. And hopefully, that sparks something in them that, lasts from when they get to middle school, high school, and hopefully to college or whatever they do when 100%. They get out of school. You know?
They'll remember you. So Bradley's your younger brother.
Mm-hmm.
He plays for the Broncos, but he's very much involved.
Mm-hmm.
Even during the season, he was coming home whenever he could, right?
And we did the holiday launch that I spoke of in Denver. So it was at Top Golf. And Bradley rounded up a lot of his teammates, not just the guys who are on the team, but Von Miller, their star running back, Philip Lindsay, so kids who are in this Denver community at these Boys and Girls Clubs who watch these guys on Sunday, now they're playing golf with them and knowing that somebody cares about them. Because like I said, Von Miller, makes $100 million. He doesn't have to be there at Top Golf. He gets, Top Golf in his backyard. And so having that feeling, and, Brad used his connections with the Boys and Girls Club because he does a tour where he just visits everyone, once a week just to, play with the kids and talk to them as a superhero in the community. And they left with $100 gift card to a supermarket so they could get Thanksgiving meals. So he's very much involved and he cares about it just as much as and that's just kind of how we were raised, Too much is given, much is, required. Right. And not saying we were millionaires, but I didn't have to struggle.
Right.
I always had food on the table. I never went to bed hungry.
Right.
And a lot of kids do. And, that's not fair to them, but at the same time, I want to, if I can, help them. Yep.
Regardless of race, religion,
exactly.
background.
Right.
Yeah. So we know what's next. We're hoping that NFL comes back.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping that we get on a team.
Yep.
What else?
I'm starting a VC fund of a fund.
Okay.
It'll be a private fund. Me and a former weight teammate. We're working on it right now. In the process of it, hopefully we have a deal that we could invest in. Hopefully we get our stuff together.
You got your MBA, right?
I don't have. So I did a program at Harvard Business School that was with MBA students.
Okay.
And so we were paired with two MBA students who were second year students in their MBA, and they were our mentors.
Got it.
And so we went through our own program, 3 months. I wish I had an MBA from Harvard Business School, but yeah. So that was, that's kind of what I did with, focusing off the field. I used my network. I got my own MBA, So what you get from MBA through networks and through, other stuff, I did it through meeting new people and connecting, going through that Harvard Business School program.
And now you're using this.
And now I'm using it. So, we're launching a fund and just kind of co-investing for a little bit to build a portfolio so that, 5-10 years from now, we could start our own private equity fund and get $10 million checks and have something to back it up, some credibility to ask for those checks.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing now.
That's what you're doing now. So you're busy.
Yeah, busy.
You're busy.
Got to stay proactive.
You got to stay proactive. And, like I said, busy's good, but never forget about the emotional connection behind it and know that it's always there no matter how busy you are every single moment of the day. And I think that's
a lot of what people do too is
cover it up.
Yeah, they over busy their schedule to not have to focus on it. And then that even just makes them drive out of control even faster.
Absolutely. So I guess I'm telling you from friend to friend, just know that it's still there and know that there are people like me that are more than willing to talk to you at any time of any part of the day. Cause I know that's what I needed growing up, and it's really hard to reach out, but I just want you to know that.
Appreciate it.
And I think people that hear this story, especially men in their 20s and 30s who are struggling themselves, will realize that like they're not alone. And that it's okay.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make you any less of a man.
Yeah.
In fact, I think from a human aspect, it makes people more attractive when they actually say, this is what's going on with me right now. Because it makes them real.
Right.
And I can relate to that.
Right.
I can tell you my whole life story at some point.
Right.
So I'm so grateful that we saw each other the other day and that you opened up and shared your story and your journey. And, if anyone wants to check out the Chubb Foundation, where can we find you?
At Chubb Foundation, Instagram and Twitter, and then chubbfoundation.com.
All right. And then your handle?
At Chubb for my
Chubb.
Instagram handle.
All right.
And I'm glad you invited me. Like you said, we ran into each other. You've had this podcast for a while now. looked at my text messages. I haven't received a text from you since July 30th, 2019. So, it was just, happenstance that I got invited.
The day I got fired.
We won't talk about that.
I know. But I appreciate your support.
Nah, for sure. Team Meg.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the 6 Feet Above podcast. I'm your host, Megan Armstrong. Subscribe so you never miss another episode, as a new episode is released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying the series, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Follow the show on Instagram at 6 Feet Above Podcast to keep the conversation going, and feel free to reach out to me directly at Megstagram11. This episode is a product of Audiographies, produced by Megan Armstrong and Denora Sepolia, edited by Jacob Smolian, and the music is by Keenan Willis. Funded by yours truly. I'll see you next time.